So, Rise of My Crazy Boss, Part 2. Well, Horrible Boss, that's what I think I called it the first time. Rise of My Horrible Boss, Part 2. So, she was late for her interview when I first met her. And at the time, was picking the pollen off lilies that we had gotten with tweezers because when they're more closed, it's just easier, and my finger doesn't, rip open the lilies because they're sensitive, kind of like me. But I'm kidding. And I ruined the joke there. Yay! Anyway, back to the story. And she was like, "Oh, you're such a good floral clerk. You're so smart to think of that." And I'm like, her voice is a little annoying, but I'm gonna push through because I was so desperate. And then she became the manager, obviously, and she had 1,000,001 problems. I taught her how to do everything, which is fine because when you start a job, you don't really know what you're doing. I had to teach her a lot because I had learned it all. And she would throw a tantrum over the smallest things, like stamping her foot tantrum. And I had no clue why she was doing it. She would make things so much harder than it needed to be. She didn't know how to design. She would leave flowers in the cooler way longer than they needed to be. I'm like, we're supposed to throw them away every 2 weeks. She's like, but they're still good. And here's a fun fact. If flowers have been in the cooler for over 2 weeks, they will look good in the cooler. But when you get them out of the cooler, they die really, really fast. And then you have customers that are mad that these flowers didn't even last a week. And so I would throw things away without her knowing. I also would try to order stuff because cactuses are super duper popular. Everybody loves cactuses. We would sell out of them instantaneously. We were struggling with money because she was spending money on the weirdest things like Father's Day bouquets. Like a lot of them, which, some dads do like flowers for Father's Day, but it's not quite as popular as Mother's Day. Speaking of Mother's Day, she left me and another gal who came in to help high and dry for 3 days during Mother's Day week. We had to prep everything for Mother's Day. And we had never done that before because I had only worked Valentine's Day and I didn't really have help in. I did a little bit of setting up, but I was very, very guided. And neither of us had set up before, and so it was like and then she made the other gal work by herself on one of those days, and the manager of the multiple departments was like, "So how you doing?" And she's like, B hasn't even called." She's like, "She hasn't even called?" "No." So she got in trouble for that. She also was jealous of my relationship with my at the time boyfriend, now husband, which is weird. Like, it's my fault that she's single. It was weird. And again, I was in floral, and so anyone else in the store didn't really know what they were doing in floral. So every time I went on break, I would go, "Hey, I'm going on break. I'm not expecting anything, da-da-da-da." But she would sometimes go on break when I was on break, which was super weird because I'm like, if we're lucky enough to have 2 people here, we have to break at different times. Okay? It just makes sense. There's only 2 of us in this department. And when she would deliver flowers, she'd be gone for hours. And she'd be like, "I got lost." And I'm like, you had the directions. Number 1. Number 2, we don't live in that big of a city. We don't deliver that far where it would take you 3-4 hours. And then she'd be like, "I work 10 hours a day." And I'm like, "I work 10 hours a day. Shut." Anyway, she also would sexually harass, the guy who delivered our flowers for us to our department. She one time was like, take off your shirt and we'll be the judge of whether you're hot or not. And I'm like, she also lied about her age. That was another thing. Oh, I was telling you that I ordered cactuses. She would cancel my order. And I'm like, I'm trying to help you get money, but whatever. Do you want this toy? There you go. Anyway, so then I ended up cleaning up her mess every Saturday that I could when she wasn't working. And the Saturday she worked with me, I hated so much because I'm like, I just don't want to work with you. And when I would process flowers on Monday, she would not help, number one, which is bad because the flowers need to get out as soon as possible so they don't die. And she tried to put away my stuff when I was processing. I'm like, I need that. So I started putting a note like, don't touch. Anyway, a little passive aggressive, just a little. Anyway, so she wouldn't throw stuff away because she felt like we were throwing away money. And I'm like, I'm only throwing away bad stuff, like bad broken stuff. And at one point, it was a Saturday. If you remember from my last video, if you watched my last video, I worked GMD every other Saturday because the other gal would have her kids those Saturdays. So on a lot of Saturdays when I worked GMD, I would also work floral. And I'd have my walkie on me, which was another thing. She never listened to her walkie. Both my bad bosses didn't use their walkie, which was super annoying. Because it's like, if I need you, then I have to run and find you. But I would also turn up the volume on the walkie to bother her. I'm a little passive aggressive. I'm very passive aggressive. Anyway, so she had scheduled me to be by myself this Saturday, and I wasn't in GMD. So I was super excited because I wasn't working the 4 hours in GMD beforehand, which gave me more time to clean up her mess, which I did every Saturday. And so I went in, I clocked in, I grabbed the till, I counted out the drawer, I put the drawer in the register, and she comes around the corner and starts screaming at me at the top of her lungs, just out of freaking nowhere. I'm like, where did this come from? And she's like, she was screaming that I needed to check the schedule, and she worked so hard to make the schedule, and I need to start looking at the schedule, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I do. Like, this is the first time, if I did get it wrong, I still don't know to this day whether I got it wrong. But whether I got it wrong or not, one time does not equal screaming at the top of your lungs. And so I was like, fine. And I ran off to the back and I clocked out. I called my dad because we only had one car at the time and they needed it because I was going to be gone until 5:30. No, 5. It was 5. And so then after that call, I called her boss, the general manager of the multiple departments, and I told her what happened, and I'm like, could you please move me to a different floral department? I know this one's the closest one to my house, but I can't do this anymore. And she's like, there's no other. I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? And so I was like, I am going to turn in my 2 weeks notice. I don't deserve to be treated like this. I'm working my butt off. I'm cleaning up her mess. I'm doing everything. And she's like, just hang in there. We're getting information. We're going to fire her soon because of all previous things that I had said. And I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be treated this way. And she's like, you don't need to be. We'll talk on Monday. And I'm like, I don't want to come back in because she was screaming that I was supposed to be in later that day, not earlier in the morning. How dare me come into work early? And she was just screaming. And I was like, fine. I don't want to come back in today. And she's like, you don't have to. And I'm like, I don't want to tell her. And she's like, I'll tell her. And I'm like, okay. So then I hang up the phone. I'm waiting. My dad finally shows up. And out comes my boss at the exact same time. Which, I don't know. The universe has it out for me sometimes. And she's again screaming, waving a paper. She's just like, I was right, you were wrong. Here's the proof and blah, 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 blah. I talked to the manager of the day and he said that you can stay and I'll just leave early. Let that sink in. I'll scream at you and then I'll make you stay and work longer than you were supposed to. We'll have all this great, wonderful tension because we've screamed at each other all day. And then I'll leave early. You reward me for bad behavior. No, I don't do that. So I was like, heck to the no. And I got in the car. I was like, no, I'm not listening. And she's like, no, you can stay. I'll just leave early. And I'm like, no. I shut the door and we left. And then I called my boyfriend at the time. And my now husband. And I was like, hey, I'm off today. Want to hang out? And he's like, sure. And that was my pettiness because I was like, fine. If I'm not working, I'm hanging out with my boyfriend. And that was the start. So I guess I'm going to have to make more parts. But remember, you have so much worth. Boundaries are important. You are doing amazing. I hope you find a reason to smile today and tomorrow and the rest of the week and the rest of your life. Why not? Thanks. Bye.